Chapter 29:11. Lin Cece stuffed a piece of honeydew melon into his mouth. "You eat too." There was an indescribable joy in her expression as she said eagerly, "You haven't come to see me in a long time." There was a hint of reproach and complaint in her words. Lan Yu smiled and reached out to stroke her hair. He said slowly, "I met her." Lin Cece's eyes widened. She stopped eating the honeydew melon and stared straight at him. After a long time, she swallowed her saliva. "Was it her?" Lan Yu grunted in acknowledgement. Lin Cece was quite excited. "Did you tell her that you missed her very much?" Lan Yu's eyes dimmed a little. After a long time, he said, "She doesn't remember me." "She doesn't remember?" Lin Cece murmured and then repeated, "She doesn't remember." She gently held her head and looked at Lan Yu carefully, as if she was talking to herself. "How can she? You've been thinking about her. How can she forget you?" "Forget? You can't forget. If you forget, you won't be able to go home." Lin Cece began to get emotional. She looked up at Lan Yu. "I can't forget. I can't forget. I can't forget. I have to go back. I have to go back. I can't leave." She kept repeating these words and couldn't stop. Lan Yu called the doctor. Lin Cece's condition was getting worse. In the end, the doctor gave her a tranquilizer. Only then did she calm down and slowly fall asleep. When everything calmed down, Lan Yu's back was already covered in sweat. He walked into the office with the doctor. The doctor thought for a moment and said, "It should have stimulated a part of her memory. Mr. Lan, if you can find that part of her memory, then Cece might still be able to get better. Her mental disorder is probably due to a great shock at the time." Lan Yu closed his eyes slightly. "I'll try my best. I'll inform you if there's any news. Try your best to take care of her." The doctor nodded. "We will. She's also a poor little girl, but she's also quite cute." When Lin Cece was sent over, she didn't speak and even call for the child. Lan Yu was the one who made the decision to abort the child. At that time, he did it without any hesitation. He was not a saint. He still felt that Lin Cece should keep a child. After communicating with the doctor, Lan Yu returned to the ward. Lin Cece slept soundly. The doctor said she would sleep until at least midnight. Lan Yu sat on the edge of the bed, gently touched her face, and tidied up all the delicious food for her. Originally, he wanted to leave, but in the end, he stayed. He was afraid that she would be scared. Once upon a time, he had treated someone so well, but that person no longer needed him. He transferred this kindness to Lin Cece, but the difference was that he loved Qin Shun at that time. Now, he only sympathized with Lin Cece and only wanted to treat her well and let her feel a little bit of warmth. Fortunately, when Lin Cece woke up that night, she had returned to normal. She seemed to have forgotten what had happened and chatted with him for a long time. She was asking him again if he missed that person. This time, Lan Yu told her that he missed her. He missed her very much. Lin Cece smiled. She smiled extremely happily. She said that she missed that person too. Lan Yu was stunned for a moment. After a while, he realized that perhaps Lin Cece still remembered Qin Shun subconsciously. She said that she missed Qin Shun. It turned out that he and Lin Cece had been relying on each other for so long because they liked the same person. He suddenly smiled. Lin Cece didn't rely on him. Chapter 29:12. Crazy for you, Lan Yu drove back to the city early in the morning. He had wanted to drive straight back to the villa, but somehow he drove to the apartment where Qin Shun used to live. It hadn't been sold and had always been taken care of. He had heard about it, but he hadn't been there because no one lived there. Lan Yu's car was parked downstairs. The sky was bright, but everything was still hazy. The rouge-colored sun was especially beautiful. He didn't get out of the car. He sat in the car and smoked quietly. He knew that he should drive away immediately, or he shouldn't have come in the first place. But he couldn't control himself. He hated her and thought about her at the same time. Lan Yu leaned back in the seat and turned on the stereo to listen. As he listened, he felt sleepy. His head tilted to the side, and he closed his eyes to sleep. When Qin Shun came back from his run, he saw a very flashy sports car downstairs, and the man sitting in the sports car was even more flashy. He was very good-looking, but looked a little gloomy, chronically unhappy, or incongruous with his life. Qin Shun knew him. His name was Lan Yu, the CEO of Grandview Corporation. His girlfriend was called Lu Wei yesterday. Qinshan looked at him and was about to run over. Rongyu was still waiting for her to buy breakfast at home. She hadn't trained her cooking skills all these years, so when she was alone with Rongyu, they could only eat out. At that moment, she had soy milk and fried dough sticks in her hands. It was a very ordinary breakfast, but Rongyu liked it very much. At that moment, the man who was sleeping with his eyes closed suddenly opened his eyes. She was a little close, so their eyes met. Chen's lips twitched. He didn't say anything and walked straight into the entryway, ignoring Lanyu. Lanyu's eyes were bloodshot. Before he could regain his senses, he had already opened the car door and got out. He blocked her before she entered the elevator and pressed her against the wall. Qinshan was dressed in sportswear. His brown hair was tied up casually, and his face was flushed because of the exercise. It was as if every pore on her body was emitting estrogen. She was completely different from the androgynous Qinshan of the past. At this time, her feminization was so natural, as if she was born this way. Lanyu pressed her down, his eyes bloodshot. He said in a harsh tone, "Why did you come back? Is it because he's dead, so he's back to me as a spare tire?" His words weren't a question at all, but a judgment. After that, he lowered his head and kissed her lips harshly as a punishment. He kissed her thoroughly and controlled her completely. No matter how much she struggled, he would always be able to control her. No one would feel good if they kissed reluctantly, especially when he had bitten her lips so hard that they almost broke. He didn't feel any better either, and the tip of his tongue almost broke. Lanyu panted and loosened his grip on her a little before he wanted to kiss her again. However, his face was stunned by the slap. Qinshan's gaze was very unfamiliar, and her voice was cold. "I don't know if you're a spare tire, but I'm sure you're crazy." Her words completely angered him. He pinched her chin, his voice cold and desolate. "Lunatic? Yes, I'm crazy." He moved closer to her and deliberately bit her lips slowly and forcefully. Drops of blood flowed down her lips and dripped onto the ground. It was a little fierce, but more ambiguous. Chapter 29:13. Qinshan wiped her lips and glared at the man in front of her. She was sure that this was the second time they had met, but the person in front of her had not only acted rudely, but had also said such a strange thing. She pursed her pretty lips and frowned. "Mr. Lan, have we ever had any unpleasant encounters?" Lanyu's eyes were full of heartache. He kept looking at her for a long time before he said, "What do you think?" She looked confused. "It seems that I've lost a part of my memory, but judging from Mr. Lan's attitude, I don't think it's a good memory. In that case, I suggest that we forget it." Qinshan paused. Besides, since Mr. Lan already has a girlfriend, he shouldn't be a chaste person, so there's no need to lose the present because of the past. She said it quickly, but Lanyu's expression was already terrible. He looked at her. She was in front of him, but she was out of his reach. He chuckled, laughing at himself and mocking her. "You seem to be the same as before. You can still beat people up." He had once been deeply fascinated by her, but now he was helpless. He deeply despised himself for being so stubborn toward her. Lanyu took a step back and leaned against the wall opposite him. He took out a cigarette, lit it, and smoked with a deep gaze. Qinshan wanted to leave. His body moved, but at this moment he spoke. His voice was very soft. "Qinshan, I've decided to officially start with Lu Wei." "Officially start?" There was a hint of surprise in Qinshan's eyes, and his heart palpitated. He called her Qinshan. He said that he and Lu Wei hadn't officially started yet. Was he going to officially get married now? Her heart pounded, and she also felt a tinge of pain. She didn't understand why she felt that way. He was clearly someone unrelated to her, so why did she feel pain? She closed her eyes and said, "It couldn't be better." She then walked towards the elevator. "It really couldn't be better." The man behind her repeated her words, then straightened up and walked towards the sunlight outside. After taking 2 steps, he paused. "You're still as heartless as before." Qinshan tilted his head and looked at him. Lanyu was the same. When their gazes met, one was unfamiliar while the other was heartbroken. In the end, he still left quickly. Qinshan had been standing there. When the sound of his car starting sounded, he noticed that the youtiao and soybean milk in his hands were gone. He turned around and looked, but he couldn't find it. She had no choice but to go out and buy another serving. When she pushed the door open, she smelled the fragrance of milk. It was the scent of little Rongyu. Qin Shun smiled and walked into the children's room. Looking at the sleeping piglet, he couldn't help but shake his head. Xiao Rongyu was very lazy and loved to sleep. Qin Shun felt that Xiao Rong was not like her, nor was she like Rong Lei. Instead, she looked like someone from their family. Tang Sher. In fact, Sher and Rongyu weren't related by blood, but for some reason, they were very similar. Qin Shun put the breakfast in the kitchen and went back to the master bedroom to take a shower. While taking a shower, she couldn't help but touch her lower lip, feeling a little hot. That kiss replayed in her mind over and over again, all the way to her face, her body heating up. He reached out his hand and adjusted the temperature of the water a little colder. Only then did his scorching body temperature decrease. However, when the water flowed through her body, crazy scenes flashed through her mind. In every scene, she was kissing a man, and even in bed, they were entangled together. Chapter 29:14. Qin Shun suddenly opened her eyes, and her breath was in a mess. What happened to her just now? Why did she think of that? Who was that man? Was it Rong Lei or someone else? She refused to think that it was someone else, and she didn't want to think that it was Lanyu. Stepping out of the bathroom, she wiped her body with a bath towel, put on a bathrobe, and walked into the children's room, feeling refreshed. Since she stepped into the modeling circle a year ago, she began her life as a trapeze artist. However, after the fashion week, she would take little Rongyu from her parents and live with him in the apartment. Little Rongyu was very obedient and a little silly. He didn't seem to be picky. Qin Shun thought of his son, and a faint smile appeared on the corner of her mouth. She vaguely understood that she seemed to have lost a part of her memory, and it was very likely to be related to the man named Lanyu. However, as she said, he already had a girlfriend, and it was really not suitable for them to be together. Besides, she was sure that she had married Rong Lei and had given birth to Rongyu. That was it. Everyone was safe. Qin Shun thought, sat by the bed, and reached out to touch his son's head. Little lazy pig, you can get up now. Little Rongyu slept soundly, wearing a one-piece bare pajamas. His facial features were extremely delicate, and his sweet sleeping appearance was even more insanely good-looking. Any parent couldn't help looking at such a good-looking son a little longer, and they would also allow him to sleep a little longer. Qin Shun called out a few times, but the little guy didn't seem to wake up. She simply went out to do yoga by herself, while waiting for little Rongyu. In the large hall, Qin Shun played music. She stretched her body and enjoyed the feeling of relaxation. She liked this feeling. She liked the feeling of peaceful life and relaxation after work. After about half an hour, little Rongyu ran out in his pajamas. The little person ran out in a puff of smoke, bringing with him the fragrance of milk. She threw herself into Qin Shun's arms and softly called out, "Mama." Then he buried his little face in Qin Shun's arms and didn't move for a long time. Qin Shun lowered his head and smiled. "What's wrong with the baby?" The little person in her arms hugged her neck tightly and said with some embarrassment, "I want to pee." Qin Shun picked him up and touched little Rongyu's nose. "Can't you take off your pajamas again?" Xiao Rong lowered her head in embarrassment. Qin Shun sighed again. His current appearance reminded him of Shuer. Tang Sher had a great influence in the Qin family. Ever since she joined the Qin family, it seemed that all the children born in the Qin family were copies of Sher. Qin Shun shuddered at the thought of it. She shook her head and carried the little fellow to the bathroom. She gently unbuttoned his shirt and taught him again. Xiao Rongyue looked at her with a confused expression. "I knew you wouldn't." Qin Shun fainted and knocked on his forehead. "I'll buy you two-piece pajamas in the future." But little Rongyu was very insistent. "I like teddy bear pajamas." "New pajamas. Mom will buy teddy bear pajamas too, okay?" Qin Shun gently coaxed him. Her face was full of motherly gentleness, not as sharp as before. But the little person was very insistent. "But I only like this one. I don't like anything else." This kind of stubborn love made Qin Shun stunned again, and then she thought of the man who appeared this morning. Was he also a kind of stubborn love for her? Chapter 29:15. Qin Shun was in a daze. The little boy had already finished using the toilet. His face was red like a kitten, and he called out, "Mom." Qin Shun smiled and helped him tidy up his clothes. Then, she held him and let him wash his face and brush his teeth. The little boy insisted on doing these things by himself. Qin Shun also thought that it was good for children to develop the habit of being independent. However, Rongyu was only willing to brush his teeth and wash his face by himself. He was completely like Cher in other aspects. However, he was still young and could be taught slowly. Moreover, Rongyu looked cute and clean, so everyone was willing to spoil him. Qin Shun was no exception. She carried the little boy to the kitchen and couldn't help but smile when she saw him eating happily. She was very happy now. It seemed that Ronglei's departure was nothing for her. Rongyu also didn't say that he wanted a father. Qin Shun reached out and patted her son's head. "Where do you want to go today?" Rongyu tilted his head and thought, the baby only wants mom. Although it was a bit irrelevant, it still warmed Qin Shun. She smiled and thought for a while. Then, "Shall we go to your Uncle Zhao's restaurant?" Rongyu tilted his head. "Can Uncle Zhao play the piano?" "Mom, will you give me some dessert?" "Does Uncle Zhao like Annie Moo?" Qin Shun's face darkened. "Rongyu, don't talk nonsense. Otherwise, your Aunt Zhao will be unhappy." Rongyu blinked and said very slowly, "Then why didn't his girlfriend be unhappy when that uncle looked at mom like that in front of her?" Qin Shun looked at her son. She was speechless. Wasn't her son only 3 years old? Wasn't he as cute as Cher? Why could he say such sharp words at a critical moment? Qin Shun automatically ignored it. "Mom doesn't know that uncle. But that uncle likes mom." Rongyu hit the nail on the head. The aunt from yesterday looked like she was about to cry. Qin Shun bent down and looked at Rongyu. She whispered, "You don't mention this topic again. Do you understand? Mummy, you were the one who said that when we meet a problem, we can't run away from it. We have to solve it." The little person was very stubborn. Qin Shun pointed at his nose. "That uncle is not mom's problem." Xiao Rongyu nodded again. "Yes, uncle. You have to settle it yourself." The little fellow raised his little head and looked at Qin Shun. "But what if he comes to mommy to solve the problem again? Is it going to be a mother's problem again?" Qin Shun was speechless. Fortunately, the little fellow stopped talking and jumped off the dining chair. Because his latest cartoon was being broadcasted right now, Qin Shun heaved a sigh of relief. He cleaned up the leftovers from his son's meal and swept them into the trash can. Then, he used his laptop to deal with work matters. He mainly contacted his agent, Sister Quan, to confirm the work arrangements for the next few days. Although she had just returned from Fashion Week, her reputation had gradually risen over the past year. There were many people looking for her to shoot advertisements or events, so she often had last-minute work arrangements. After finishing his work, Qin Shun closed his laptop and took Rongyu to change his clothes. Then, he went back to his parents' house for lunch. In the afternoon, he took Rongyu to the amusement park to play. Xiao Rongyu argued for a long time before Qin Shun agreed. Chapter 29:16. When they arrived at Zhao Yan's restaurant, it was almost 8 o'clock. Fortunately, she had made a reservation, so she was directly received by the waiter. When Qin Shun carried Xiao Rongyu in, the little fellow was extremely excited because the beautiful lady from Uncle Zhao's house might come. However, after looking around and not seeing her, Xiao Rongyue's little head drooped down in disappointment. Qin Shun looked at him gently and said, "Can I ask Uncle Zhao to bring her next time?" Xiao Rongyue was still listless and yawned. "Mom, where am I? I'm so sleepy. I want to sleep. Uncle Zhao will play the piano later. Do you want to listen?" Qin Shun teased him. Xiao Rongyue looked serious and said, "It's lonely to listen to it alone." Hearing the little guy's words, Qin Shun was speechless. He carried the little guy to the seat and began to order. Xiao Rongyue looked disappointed. When Zhao Yan saw Qin Shun coming over, he walked over and bent down to kiss Xiao Rongyue before sitting down. Qin Shun glanced at Rongyue. The little guy immediately understood and called out, "Uncle Zhao." Zhao Yan smiled and rubbed his little head, but he said to Qin Shun, "How long are you going to stay this time?" After ordering, Qin Shun handed the food to the waiter and said slowly, "About 2 months." Zhao Yan nodded, and his eyes stayed on her face for a few seconds. That gaze made Qin Shun sigh slightly and touch his face. "I look a little like Qin Mu now, don't I?" Xiao Rongyuan knew that Zhao Yan liked Qin Mu. She was really worried about Zhao Yan, whether he was happy or not. Her words made Zhao Yan fall into a trance for a moment. Then he smiled and shook his head. A little, but not too much. He knew Qin Mu and liked Qin Mu. Whether it was Qin Mu when she was a young girl or Qin Mu after she divorced Zhou Chongwang, they were all fragile. Qin Shun was too strong. Even now, when she lost her memory, she was still calm. Even though her appearance had changed, she was still powerful, and she was still the ruler of his life. It was as if the people who cared about her were like fireflies around her. Zhao Yan smiled as he thought about it, forgetting that Qin Shun had lost his memory. He blurted out, "Lan Yu was there too." "Lan Yu?" Qin Shun looked up at Zhao Yan, a little surprised that he would mention this name. Was it someone from the Qin family, someone related to the Qin family, or someone who knew her and knew Lan Yu? Was he really an important person in her life? Qin Shun took a sip of water and smiled faintly without saying anything. Zhao Yan didn't say anything else. Obviously, Qin Shun wasn't very interested. At this time, the waiter began to serve the dishes. Zhao Yan ate with them for a while, chatted for a while, and then went on stage to play. As for Qin Shun, he listened quietly. She could hear that there was a touch of sadness in Zhao Yan's music tonight. Was it because he was thinking of Qin Mu? She smiled faintly. After Zhao Yan finished playing, he looked at her and gestured for her to go over. Qin Shun walked over, and Zhao Yan made way for her. He smiled faintly and said, "Play a few songs for me. I'm not in a good state tonight." Qin Shun's eyes fell on his face quietly, and after a long time, she looked down and said, "If you say that, I will feel a little guilty." Zhao Yan smiled and chose to chat with Xiao Rongyue. Although the child was young, he was very good at talking and was quite interesting. Chapter 29:17. Thinking of this, Zhao Yan's eyes fell on Qin Shun on the stage. She was wearing a long dress, and her brown curly hair was scattered on her shoulders. She looked very calm. Her slender fingers fell on the piano, and they were fair and beautiful. Zhao Yan looked at her quietly and smiled faintly. Qin Shun was Qin Shun, and Qin Mu was Qin Mu. Qin Shun was the one who could play the piano by himself, and Qin Mu was the one who listened to him. Even though he was famous in the American music industry, even though he was just a substitute, he still liked to be here. Because there was a little girl who liked to listen to him play the piano here, even though he was just a substitute. Zhao Yan knew that his wife had guessed his feelings for Qin Mu, but he didn't say it, and she didn't mention it either. She was a traditional woman who respected and loved her husband and devoted herself to their children. As she grew older, she was still beautiful and delicate. What else could he be dissatisfied with? Thinking of this, Zhao Yan couldn't help smiling. While he was smiling, he saw Lan Yu walking over. Zhao Yan also knew the person next to him. Her name was Lu Wei, a famous model. At this time, Lu Wei was holding Lan Yu's arm, and it seemed that something good was about to happen. Why did he say so? Because there was an old couple next to them, and it was obvious that they were Lu Wei's parents. In addition, Lan Yu's father was also there. This should be a very important dinner, and it went without saying that the parents of both sides appeared together. Because they were the owner of the restaurant, and he knew them, Zhao Yan couldn't pretend that he didn't see them, although he wanted to. So he stood up and said, "Lan Yu." Then he nodded to the elders. Lan Yu smiled faintly and was about to say something, but then he saw Rong Yu sitting next to him. At that moment, his eyes seemed to be in a dream. Because if Rong Yu was there, then that damn woman should also be there. He had a hunch and immediately turned his head to look at the stage. The moment he saw it, his heart clenched fiercely. He clearly wanted to draw a clear line between them, but when he looked at her, his heart still palpitated. She sat there quietly, playing the song of the past, except that she had long hair, except that she had changed. Everything else was the same as before. At that moment, Lan Yu even forgot about Lu Wei beside him. He only felt that he was still with Qin Shun. In just a moment, he came back to his senses, and his gaze became slightly cold. Lu Wei was a little embarrassed. How could she not see that Lan Yu was different? But what could she do? If a man's heart isn't with you, you can't do anything even if you want to. Fortunately, Qin Shun had a child, and she was a married woman. So, she looked at Papa Lan. She thought that Lan Yu's father probably wouldn't want Lan Yu to marry a married woman, right? At this moment, Lan Yu's father's expression was complicated. He naturally knew what was on his son's mind. Lan Yu had been fooling around for 2 years, and he had long known that he had settled down to find a girlfriend. However, he hadn't brought her home, so he knew that he hadn't let go of Qin Shun. Today, little Lu had called him and said that he had invited him to dinner. No matter what, he couldn't refuse. She had been dating you for half a year, and it wouldn't be right if you didn't give her face by inviting her parents to dinner. He came, and looking at Lan Yu's expression, he knew that Lan Yu was reluctant to have this meal. Now that he looked at Qin Shun, he was even more certain that his son was thinking of someone. However, everything was a foregone conclusion. So what could he do? Chapter 29:18. Lu Wei turned her head and pressed her face against Lan Yu's arm. She said softly, "Lan Yu, didn't you say that you were going to order a song for me?" As she spoke, her eyes quietly fell on Qin Shun, who was on the stage. Qin Shun was soft and gentle, but she had a strong aura, which was why she had become famous so quickly within a year. This made Lu Wei feel a little threatened. She was now the #1 supermodel in Asia, but Qin Shun's momentum would surpass her one day. Therefore, she wanted to marry herself to Lan Yu before that happened. However, she didn't expect that she and Qin Shun were not only professional competitors, but also emotional competitors. Even though Qin Shun was passive, Lu Wei couldn't ignore it. As she said this, Lan Yu frowned. He didn't expect that the person playing the piano here was Qin Shun. If he had known, he wouldn't have agreed to Lu Wei's request. At this moment, the elders of both sides were here, so it was not appropriate for him to back down. With a calm expression, he called the waiter over and said a few words. Lu Wei was very satisfied. The waiter nodded and walked over. He whispered a few words to Qin Shun, who had finished playing a song. Qin Shun was a little surprised and turned her head to look over. Then she saw Lan Yu and Lu Wei standing side by side. Next to them were probably the parents of both sides. One look was enough to tell what kind of meal it was. And this man had come to her apartment and kissed her forcefully this morning. Qin Shun looked down and smiled coldly. He didn't say anything and played the song, Rose of England, according to Lan Yu's request. The restaurant had a small dance floor, which was very romantic. Lu Wei took Lan Yu's hand and slowly walked up. From start to finish, Lan Yu had been very passive. Because there were elders around, he had no choice but to give her face. Unless he gave up on Lu Wei now. He didn't want to do that in front of Qin Shun. With a touch of resentment towards Qin Shun, he danced with Lu Wei. Qin Shun played the song very well. It could be seen that he had practiced it before. Lan Yu vaguely remembered that playing the zither was a habit she had developed when she was with Rong Lei. Now that Rong Lei was gone, she still kept this habit. Indeed, it was true love. There was a cold glint in his eyes. He really didn't feel any pity for Lu Wei, and he was even a little distracted. After the song ended, Qin Shun stood up and quietly looked at the pair of wall figurines on the stage. It was indeed correct. Lu Wei's gaze fell on her face. It was calm and peaceful. Suddenly, she said to Lan Yu, "I heard you prepared a ring." Lan Yu frowned in displeasure. There were 2 rings in Lu Wei's palm. She said very softly, "Lan Yu, shall we get married?" As a woman, she had done the extreme, taking care of all the men's work. Lan Yu looked at her and didn't say anything for a long time. After a long time, he smiled. This kind of thing should be done by men. He took the ring from her hand and gently put it on for her. Lu Wei was a little surprised, and there were tears in her eyes. But she was still uneasy. "Lan Yu, will you be angry with me?" "No," he answered too quickly, which seemed to be insincere. Lu Wei didn't notice that when she wanted to put the ring on for him, Lan Yu withdrew his hand and said lightly, "I'm not used to wearing a ring. I'd better not wear it." With that, he looked at Qin Shun on the stage. Chapter 29:19. Lu Wei was a little disappointed, but she still forced a smile. Finally, He put on the ring for her, even though the ring was prepared for her. The process wasn't important, the result was important. She knew that she was a little impatient. As a woman, she should wait for a man to chase after her, but Lan Yu had been passive from the beginning to the end. She was afraid that if she waited any longer, she would still be at the same place at the age of 30. She didn't regret it, especially after Chen appeared in front of Lan Yu at the airport that day. Lu Wei looked down at her fingers and raised her eyes, which were filled with excitement. Then, she tiptoed slightly and kissed Lan Yu's lips lightly. Although Lan Yu was wrong, he didn't push her away. The occasion didn't allow him to push her away. Lu Wei stepped back a little, but she still couldn't calm down. At this moment, at Zhao Yan's table, the little person sitting next to Zhao Yan asked softly, "Uncle Zhao, that uncle obviously doesn't like her and is unwilling. Why did he still kiss that Annie?" Xiao Rongyu was very happy to see kisses on TV. "Appa, I like you so much. I like you too." Kissing shameful face. Unlike the uncle on the stage, who had a serious face. Xiao Rongyu pouted as she spoke. Zhao Yan held back his laughter, looked at the little fellow, and said with a smile, "Yu, why don't you go up and bless that uncle?" Xiao Rongyu looked at Zhao Yan with a touch of curiosity. Since when did Uncle Zhao become so kind? Zhao Yan took a rose from the vase on the table and gave it to Xiao Rongyu. "Hurry up and go up." Xiao Rongyu's expression was stiff, but he still took the rose and ran up the stage. His short legs were indescribably cute as he ran. Zhao Yan couldn't help but smile. He was willing to bet that Xiao Rongyu wouldn't play by the rules. Sure enough, the little fellow wanted to reach out and give the rose, but after a while, he retracted his hand. Under so many gazes, Xiao Rongyu hugged Lan Yu's leg and cried. That was really sad. "Daddy," little Rongyu wailed. When he raised his little face, there were clear tears on his face. He looked very pitiful. The people who saw it were quite moved, not to mention the little fellow's following lines. "Daddy, don't abandon me, and Mommy, don't marry the bad auntie. Wow, 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 Mommy is so pitiful. Yaya can't afford to eat, so Mommy can only come here to work, and she has to bring Yaya here. Daddy, please don't marry someone else." Zhao Yan burst out laughing. Xiao Rongyu was definitely an actor, and he performed extremely well. Zhao Yan smiled as he thought to himself. This performance was not really a performance. It was probably Lan Yu's aura that allowed little Rongyu to break through his emotions. Perhaps the little fellow yearned for a father's love and did not seem to care as much as he did on the surface. On the stage, Lan Yu was slightly stunned. Lu Wei's face was filled with embarrassment. There was a trace of tears in her eyes as she looked at Lan Yu in disbelief. She could accept that Lan Yu had a past, but it didn't mean that she could accept that he and Qin Shun had a child. This child belongs to Lan Yu? Lu Wei's one night of victory was gone. The beautiful and exquisite little boy in front of her had shattered all her fantasies. Just as she was about to ask, Qin Shun walked over and reached out to take Xiao Rongyu off Lan Yu's body. He smiled apologetically. "Sorry, Rongyu is a little naughty. You guys continue." After that, she carried the Oscar-winning actor off the stage. Although it was quiet, the people on the stage could not get off the stage. Chapter 29:20. Qin Shun turns his head. Lan Yu's mouth is cold. "Miss Qin, no, it should be Mrs. Rong. Don't you want to explain it now?" Qin Shun's eyes become cold. "Explain what?" Lu Wei can't help but say, "Explain that your child is not Lan Yu's." Her tone is quite like a wife following her husband's song. Qin Shun smiles faintly. She held little Rongyu in her arms, wishing that she could kill this little guy. However, her son was her own, and she had to teach him a lesson when she got home. She would never be at a disadvantage in front of outsiders, not to mention this strange couple. So she says in a low voice, "The reason why you misunderstood is probably that he saw Mr. Lan appear in my apartment this morning and kissed me." Lu Wei's body stiffens, and then she looks at Lan Yu. Her eyes are full of disbelief and deep hurt. Lan Yu is expressionless and says nothing. Mr. Lan is a little uncomfortable. After all, on the day his son and Lu Wei confirmed their relationship, he went to find his ex. More importantly, he kissed her forcibly. His son now calls him father, and it's no wonder that others are to blame. It's Lan Yu's own fault. Mr. Lan wants to comfort his future in-laws, but he doesn't know where to start. Zhao Yan, who's been watching the show, laughs to death. Qin Shun and his son are really lethal, especially to Lan Yu. Lan Yu's fiancée is to blame. She looks very dignified, but she can't control her temper. Why did she have to provoke Qin Shun? After saying that, Qin Shun walks down the stage with the little guy in his arms. And Lan Yu, under countless eyes, becomes the representative of a scumbag. Lu Wei says tiredly, Lan Yu, let's forget it for the time being. She takes off the ring and wants to give it back to him, but Lan Yu doesn't take it. Lu Wei remembers that she bought the ring herself, and her heart is even more sad. Lan Yu put one hand in his pocket and asked quietly, are we going to let it go? He doesn't care who he marries, as long as she is a good woman who won't bother him or make him feel pressured. Lu Wei originally wanted to test his attitude, but she didn't expect Lan Yu to be so direct. She is a little confused for a moment. After a while, she says with difficulty, do you want to break up? It's up to you. Lan Yu says lightly, not giving her face in front of Lu Wei's parents. In fact, tonight, she had already touched his bottom line. She had done many things behind his back and had intentionally provoked Qin Shun. He hates Qin Shun, but it doesn't mean that anyone can target him. After Lan Yu finished speaking, Lu Wei's voice trembled slightly. If I say that I want to break up, will you agree? Lan Yu did not speak. He was waiting for Lu Wei's decision. Lu Wei closes her eyes and finally says in a low voice, I need to think about it. Lan Yu doesn't force her. He turns sideways and nods to the elders of the Lu family. Sorry, I don't think Lu Wei and I have made up our minds. Lu Wei's parents sighs in their hearts. How can they not see the situation? Lan Yu obviously doesn't like Lu Wei, but he is willing to take it slow. It is Lu Wei who is too anxious. However, Lu Wei's parents still ask. The child just now, after asking, Lan Yu's father pricks up his ears. He cares about this more than anyone else. Lan Yu's eyes become cold in an instant, and his voice is as deep as dripping water. Not mine. Chapter 29-21. Lan Yu didn't give her a chance. He said politely, Uncle Lu, Aunt Lu, I'll arrange for you to go back to the hotel. He glanced at Lu Wei. I'll send my father back. Lu Wei was unwilling, but the ring had been removed. She couldn't put it back on. Under Lan Yu's arrangement, she left with her parents, and Lan Yu sent his father home. In the parking lot, his father refused. He turned to look at Lan Yu and sighed. I can see that in your heart. No, Lan Yu said quickly. It's all in the past. As he spoke, he took out a cigarette from his pocket, lit it, and smoked quietly. His father stretched out his hand. Do you have any cigarettes? Lan Yu looked at his father in surprise. His father smiled bitterly. I haven't smoked for a long time. I miss it. He was not in good health and had quit smoking for many years. Lan Yu thought for a moment and handed him a cigarette. The father and son smoked in the parking lot. His father blew out a smoke ring and looked at the cigarette in his hand. I miss this smell, just like how I miss your mother. Even though she has many faults, she has been with me for many years. Lan Yu didn't feel good when he heard that. Until now, his mother's death was still a mystery. He looked up at the incandescent light above and said softly, I'll figure it out one day. His father patted him on the shoulder. It doesn't matter. She's gone. Dad is most worried about you now. He looked at Lan Yu. Dad wants you to follow your heart and not force yourself. How could he not see the light in Lan Yu's eyes when the child called Lan Yu Dad today? At that moment, his son's heart was filled with hope, right? But maybe it was only for 2 seconds, and then it was shattered. Mr. Lan couldn't help but think that if Rong Lei hadn't appeared at that time, Qin Shun and Lan Yu's child might have grown up. At that time, they were so close, and he also thought that his son would have changed and gotten married. Although he had a girlfriend now, how could it be the same? One was in the palm of his hand, and the other was a proposal that the girl took the initiative. Mr. Lan didn't really approve of it, but he couldn't refuse the woman's request. After smoking a cigarette, he smiled at his son and said, Just let the driver take me. You can do what you need to do. As he spoke, he seemed to have thought of something. By the way, are you still taking care of Lin Cece? Lan Yu nodded. Yes, I'm still taking care of him. She's quite pitiful, Father Lon nodded. It's good to do something good, but don't get too involved. You will get married and have children in the future. The woman might not be able to tolerate Lin Cece. Lon Yu understood his meaning. I know what I'm doing. That's good. Mr. Lon forced a smile and finally got into the car to say goodbye. Lon Yu watched the car slowly leave, and the faint smile on his face slowly turned cold. He walked back to the restaurant and went to the washroom. But in the hallway, he saw Qin Shen coming out. They didn't have anything to do with each other, but when he saw her, all his anger was instantly ignited. Lon Yu leaned against the end of the hallway, and there was a little bit of blood burning between his fingers. He looked at Qin Shen quietly. Qin Shen hesitated for a moment, but still walked over. The dim yellow light shone on her face, forming a soft shadow. But only he knew that she hadn't changed at all. The gentleness was just a facade. Chapter 29-22. Qin Shen stopped and looked at Lon Yu. Her first feeling was that the man was unhappy. Because he was unhappy, he was a bit abnormal. Qin Shen sneered. Lu Wei is not dead yet. Don't you want to seduce other women? Seduce? Lon Yu repeated those two words softly. He looked at Qin Shen with a burning gaze. I thought my feelings toward you were hatred. Qin Shen smiled faintly. His eyes shone brightly under the light of the crystal, but in Lon Yu's eyes, there was an indescribable resentment. He hated her. So many things had happened, but she had become peaceful and lived a good life. She looked like a virtuous wife now. It was a pity that Ron Lei was no longer there, so he couldn't enjoy it. While he was thinking, Qin Shen said coldly, Mr. Lon, then carry out your hatred to the end, and Lon Yu glared at her. Qin Shen didn't pay any more attention to him and walked straight outside. She had only taken 2 steps when her hand was taken, and then she fell into a warm embrace. She wanted to struggle, but he warned her, you can scream as much as you want right now. Scream and call a lot of people over so that they can see you hugging a man. Qin Shen was so angry that he reached out and slapped him. Lon Yu was slapped and glared at her. Then he tightened his arms and held her firmly in his arms. He lowered his head and kissed her lips. His lips were hot, and his voice was even hotter. If you don't understand what seduction is, this is seduction. As he spoke, he impolitely pressed her lips again and again, not giving her a chance to escape. Qin Shen wanted to struggle, but his arms were so strong. He was a thin man, but the muscles hidden under the civilized clothes were so strong. He kissed her crazily. He kissed her so hard that he almost bit through her lips. Qin Shen reached out and pushed him. His voice was suppressed and restrained. Let go of me. She loathed him body and soul. Regardless of whether she had any entanglements with this man in the past, this man had just proposed to Lu Wei tonight, and now he was kissing her in the hallway. She despised him, perhaps sensing her thoughts. Lon Yu sneered. Didn't you tell others that I kissed you by force? Now I'll tell you what a real kiss is. His hatred for her was not because their engagement had been ruined. In fact, he did not have that intention. He was angry with her just because of her. The nature of this kiss slowly changed because of the narrow corridor, because both of their bodies were wearing very little clothes, because of his long-lasting hatred and longing, and because of his repression and restraint. He could not bear it any longer. He kissed her from her lips to her neck, and even to the more private parts. As long as Qin Shen struggled, he would grab her hand and raise it above her head. Then he would bury his head and bite her fiercely. It was painful and happy. His heart was in chaos. On such a sweaty night, he seemed to have returned to the short time he and Qin Shen had. Sweet and bitter. He despised himself for still having such a strong desire for her body. Yes, even a top model like Lu Wei could not arouse his interest at all. Chapter 29-23. But at this time, facing Qin Shen, he was like a young boy in his 20s, unable to restrain his emotions. Suddenly, he stopped, his handsome face buried in her neck as he panted. All the excitement seemed to have been doused with cold water. His lips touched her beautiful neck, and he murmured, I hate myself for being like this. After that, he took a step back and wanted to continue. A stream of cold water sprayed at him. A little voice said, Let go of my mommy. However, The little person did not control it well. Not only Lan Yu, but also Qin Chen's body was drenched. It was summer, so they were not wearing much. When the water sprayed, their curves were exposed. Lan Yu's cold heart suddenly became hot again. His eyes were deep. Xiao Rongyu dropped the water gun and stood in front of his mother. His little face was tense. "Don't touch my mommy." Lan Yu looked at the delicate child in front of him, and there was a touch of pain in his eyes. This child was conceived by Rongyu when he and Qin Shun were together. It was a humiliation to him, but the child was so good-looking that he could not feel a trace of disgust. Instead, he felt that the child was too good-looking. He could not help but reach out to touch him. However, Xiao Rongyu took a step back and stared at Lan Yu's eyes. "Don't you dare take advantage of me." Qin Shun leaned his head against the wall. He did not know whether to laugh or cry. As for Lan Yu, no matter how angry and emotional he was, he could not do anything to Qin Shun in front of a child. Moreover, he had already regained his rationality. He looked up at Qin Shun and said coldly, "Mrs. Rong, you can pretend that I'm drunk." There was an indescribable sarcasm in his words. No matter how mean Qin Shun was, she still had to maintain her image in front of her son. She had to remember that she was a poor mother who was being persecuted. Thus, he lowered his eyes and said very indifferently, "Mr. Lan, it's fine as long as you don't forget your identity." Lan Yu gave her a deep look and then looked at the delicate child. In the end, he backed off and left in a sorry state. Qin Shun was still standing there, watching him leave. Xiao Rong tugged at her. "Mama, you'll get sick like this." He was referring to Qin Chen's wet body. Qin Shun smiled at his son and reached out to comfort him. Then, he took out his phone and sent a message. "Help me find a few people. Look for Lan Yu from the Grand Hyatt. Once you find him, beat him up. Just don't kill him." After sending the message, she smiled gently at her son. "Mommy is going to change first." She brought Xiao Rongyue to Zhao Yan's office. Zhao Yan still had his wife's clothes. Fortunately, they were all sportswear. Although they were a little short, they could still be worn. However, when Zhao Yan saw Qin Chen's legs, he started to doubt his life. It was just a pair of shorts, but Qin Chen looked different when she wore them. No wonder she became popular so quickly. The speed at which she became popular was the same as the famous Brazilian model Gisele Bündchen back then. She was better in terms of aura and bone structure. Even Xiao Rongyu learned to appreciate it and whistled. Qin Shin knocked his head lightly, and Xiao Rongyu immediately became obedient. "Then we'll go first. We'll return the clothes to her another day." Qin Shin smiled and said, "Do you want me to tell her personally? Otherwise, she'll suspect you next time when she can't find the clothes." Chapter 29-24. Zhao Yan smiled carelessly. No need. His little wife was very simple. Even if she found out, or even if it was another woman, she would believe it if he wanted to lie to her. She was a little girl who was so simple that he couldn't bear to hurt her. Zhao Yan was supposed to go home after 10 o'clock, but he changed his mind now. He took his coat and walked out with Qin Shin. "Let me give you a ride." Qin Shin refused with a faint smile. "I drove here." Zhao Yan looked at her for a while and made sure that she had no problem. So he smiled and said, "Okay." After that, he said goodbye to Qin Shin in the parking lot. Xiao Rongyue looked at him eagerly. Zhao Yan smiled, bent down, and kissed the little fellow. "I'll bring her to play with you next time." Xiao Rongyue was a little happier now. Qin Shin smiled helplessly. Her son was only 3 years old, but he was already so lecherous. As a mother, she was under a lot of pressure. She was really afraid that he would chase girls all day long after he went to school and scare them to tears. She took her son to the car and watched him sit in the child's chair. Then she buckled her seatbelt and started the car. The white sports car was driving in the dark. She was focused on driving, and after a while, her phone rang. She picked it up with Bluetooth. The voice on the other side of the phone was crisp and efficient. "Miss Qin, it's all done. I stopped him at the door of Mr. Lan's villa. Mr. Lan will have to be hospitalized for about a week this time." Qin Shin nodded and hung up the phone. Then, her eyes became gentle again as she looked at Xiao Rongyue in the rearview mirror. Xiao Rongyue looked curious. "Mom, who called?" "It's your Uncle Qin and Mo," Qin Shin lied calmly. The little fellow nodded and then said casually, I thought Mom would take revenge today. Chen raised his eyebrows. Xiao Rongyue said in an old-fashioned way, "It's the uncle who took advantage of Mom. According to Mom's character, shouldn't you find someone to beat him up?" Chen's heart was breaking down. He coughed lightly and said, "Is Mom that fierce?" She felt that in front of her son, she was very gentle and kind. What made her son think that she was such a shrew? Xiao Rongyu smiled. "Intuition. Your intuition isn't very accurate." Chen's face darkened. "You have to believe in science and the future." Rongyu was still smiling. "There's also this." A cell phone appeared in the little fellow's hand out of nowhere. Chen saw from the rearview mirror that the sports car swayed, because it was his cell phone. The little fellow looked at his mother and said seriously, "Mom, you've been teaching me to be an honest child. It turns out that adults can be dishonest." Chen really didn't know how to educate this child. He was too clever. Her face darkened. "The adult world is very complicated." Xiao Rong nodded in understanding. "That uncle kissed my mother, and the law couldn't protect her. That's why he gave him a good beating. That's the justice of darkness." Chen was speechless. Then she calmly said to her son, "Rongyu, do you want to change your ambition and become a lawyer in the future?" Xiao Rongyu screamed, "You want me to serve those rich people?" Chen was a little worried about his son's worldview. Chapter 29-25. Chen was a little speechless. Then, as a mother, she asked worriedly, "Is the person begging you a man or a woman?" Xiao Rongyu was in a dilemma. He thought carefully for a moment before answering, "I may not be able to control that, but if a woman begs me, I will be soft-hearted." Soft-hearted? Well, Chen didn't know anything else, but it was true that her son had inherited 100% of her sharp tongue. To be honest, Chen didn't dislike herself, but she disliked Xiao Rongyu's sharp tongue very much, because she was deeply worried that he would not be able to find a wife in the future. Late at night, the mother and son went back in the same car, which was quite warm. When they arrived home, Xiao Rongyu, who was only 3 years old, fell asleep soon. Chen took a shower and put on a black bathrobe. While drying her long hair, she sat in the living room of the apartment and watched the news on TV. As the president of the world's largest hotel chain, Lan Yu was attacked and beaten up in the middle of the night. It would definitely be on the financial news and maybe even the social headlines. Sure enough, as soon as the TV was turned on, almost all the channels were bombarding the news. The spokesperson of Grandview Group clenched her fists in front of the camera and clamored to catch that person. Shredded, sliced, and cut. As Chen watched, a cold smile appeared on his lips. She changed her clothes and turned on the butler service. Almost immediately, a butler came to take care of Xiao Rongyu for her. When Chen drove out, it was already 1 o'clock at night. The night was quiet. There were almost no pedestrians on the street. She opened the window and drove the car. The night wind was cool and very comfortable. It took Chen about half an hour to drive to a private hospital. Coincidentally, it was Shengyuan. Chen's car stopped, and she looked up at the building. In her memory, it seemed to have been renovated. She looked at it for a long time, then opened the door and got out. Walking to the corridor of the hospital at night, only a few young nurses passed by occasionally. But most of the young nurses knew Chen. Even if she now had long hair and looked like a woman, the young nurses still recognized her. They were tongue-tied. "Dr. Chen. Oh my God, it's Dr. Chen." Chen stood still and smiled faintly. She remembered that she used to be a doctor, but she had forgotten all about her major. She remembered the building in front of her, but it was not as deep. She looked at the young nurse and asked in a slightly hoarse voice, "Do you know me?" The nurse was very excited. "Of course, Dr. Chen. You used to be very popular in our hospital." The young nurse blushed as she spoke. It was very meaningful. In the past, she used to think of Dr. Chen as a fantasy, but Dr. Chen was not only a woman, but also such a beautiful woman. Chen looked at the young nurse and smiled. "Can you take me to the place where I used to work?" The nurse was stunned for a moment before she said, "Of course you can. Mr. Yi has been keeping your office untouched." Chen smiled. It was Big Brother. When she was in France, although she did not return to China, her older brother would fly over every month, and Cher would follow him. She was a little touched, but she still looked cold on the surface. The young nurse was even more excited than she was. She led her into the elevator and said excitedly, "Dr. Qin, your office is located in the best place in Shengyuan." Chapter 29-26. Qin Shen's smile was a little subtle. The little nurse took it for granted. It was Mr. Yi who personally invited a feng shui master to choose the place for you. Because the best place was the director's office, so the little nurse's voice lowered. The director moved to another place to work. Qin Shen smiled indifferently. Was I so domineering at that time? No. It was Mr. Yi who loved you. The little nurse quickly waved her hand. Qin Shen didn't say anything more. The elevator had reached the 26th floor and stopped with a ding. The little nurse led the way in front and explained, "Our hospital has adopted the latest fingerprint lock, so Dr. Qin, you can go in and have a look now." After that, she stopped at the door of an office. Qin Shen raised his finger slightly, and the fingerprint immediately opened the door lock. He looked at the little nurse. The little nurse explained with a smile, "It was probably Mr. Yi who went to your place to collect the fingerprint." Qin Shen smiled and opened the door. He said softly, "I want to have a look alone." The little nurse nodded. When she was about to leave, she suddenly turned her head and looked at Qin Shen. "By the way, Dr. Qin, President Lan is still living in the same VIP ward, number 288. As she said that, she blinked. Qin Shen coughed slightly. "How did you know that I came to see him?" The little nurse smiled. "You have pepper spray in your hand, and President Lan is the only one in the whole hospital who has a new grudge against you." Qin Shen stood there. Her heart sank. Another person told her about her past with Lan Yu. She said with difficulty, "Do I have a deep grudge against him?" The little nurse looked at Qin Shen's expression, gave a hollow laugh, and asked carefully, "Dr. Qin, you don't have amnesia, do you?" Qin Shen nodded. The little nurse wanted to beat herself to death. She really had amnesia. Qin Shen's amnesia was very unique. Due to the mistake of Ron Lei's water of time, her memory was fragmented, and the part that belonged to Lan Yu was sealed. Moreover, some fragments related to Lan Yu were also sealed, so his memories were somewhat fragmented. This was especially true for Shengyuan, an important place. She couldn't remember many people with important clues. Qin Shen pursed his lips and smiled faintly. The young nurse was quite upset. Although Dr. Qin was very beautiful now, she still liked the handsome Dr. Qin. At least at that time, Dr. Qin had President Lan. Now, the young nurse left the room. Qin Shen's eyes were profound as he slowly pushed the door open. Inside, there was not a speck of dust. There was something familiar about it. She walked over and touched the expensive porcelain, the coffee set, and the Italian luxury brand calf leather sofa. This place is full of extravagance, but the taste is good. Following his intuition, Qin Shen walked to a place and opened a jar. The coffee beans inside were intact. She smelled them. They were very fragrant. The blood in her bones told her which domestic coffee beans were from, how much they were worth, and how many grams should be used to make a cup of coffee. Thinking about it, she had already begun to weigh the coffee and wash the coffee pot. When the aroma filled the air, she walked to the dressing room inside and opened the closet door. A large row of men's clothes were hung neatly, and the brands were so extravagant that she couldn't bear to look at them. Now that Qin Shen was in the fashion industry, she wouldn't wear such top-notch brands. It would feel too pretentious. Not to mention, she wore men's clothes. Looking at the clothes in the closet, she pulled out a set and put it on. Chapter 29-27. Qin Shen slowly returned to the outer room and gently poured 2 cups of coffee. She picked up the expensive bone porcelain cup and took a sip. It was slightly bitter, but there was a familiar taste. There was another taste, which was the taste of heartache. She didn't notice that the door was opened. Lan Yu, whose whole body was bandaged, stood at the door and looked at Qin Shen in shock. She was wearing the clothes of the past, leaning against the office and drinking the brewed coffee. Her expression was exactly the same as before. Yes, exactly the same, except for her long brown hair, which was also tied up at this time. Lan Yu looked at her in shock and couldn't move at all. Qin Shin smelled the coffee and suddenly looked up at Lan Yu at the door. She pursed her lips and smiled faintly. Mr. Lan was seriously injured, but he could still run so far. Her beautiful face was tilted and her expression was a little mocking. "Are you here to reminisce?" Lan Yu didn't move and kept looking at her. His expression was as if he was in a dream, and he slowly walked over. When she didn't notice, he suddenly hugged her. The action was so fast that she couldn't react, and the coffee in her hand spilled. "Lan Yu." In a moment of desperation, she called his name. Lan Yu didn't seem to hear it, and still locked her arms and body. He was so strong that he seemed to crush her. "You're finally back." His face was buried in her neck, and his voice was hoarse. Qin Shin struggled a little. "Let go of me." At this time, Lan Yu also saw the pepper spray on the table and slowly became sober. Only then did he understand why she came to the hospital. He also knew who beat him up tonight. Anger rose. He carried her with one hand and walked straight forward. Qin Shin hit his shoulder and said angrily, "What do you want, Lan Yu?" He kept walking until he pressed her against the wall. His body was boiling hot against her, and his eyes seemed to contain fire. "What do I want to do?" He trapped her with his body and moved closer to her. "I want to see what it feels like to be someone else's wife, or to see what's different about you now that you're a woman." Qin Shun was stunned. He actually wanted to. She struggled fiercely, but he held her in place, kissing her recklessly. He was as rude as a wounded animal. After realizing her intentions, he took the pepper spray she had brought and sneered. "This can't save you either." He rudely lifted her little face. "Mrs. Rong, shouldn't you pay the price for beating me up like this?" He forced her to look at him, and his voice was so cold that ice could be shaken off. "You know very well that it's not difficult to find out who is behind this. I can sue you until you spend the rest of your life in prison." Qin Shin raised his head. "Sue. President Lan can also sue me for harassment. Isn't that better?" Lan Yu looked up and stared at her angrily. He sneered. "Then I might as well make it true." He held her delicate chin and said word by word, "You can sue me for rape." With that, he moved closer to her and whispered in her ear, "Because I'm going to have sex with you soon." Qin Shin's eyes widened. He said sarcastically, "I seem to like you better in men's clothes than in women's clothes, because it's more satisfying." His words were clearly insincere, and he was just trying to deceive himself. Chapter 29-28. His words were clearly insincere, and he was just trying to deceive himself. He had been so shocked when he first saw her at the airport. Qin Shin raised his knee. As Lan Yu screamed in pain, she looked at him coldly. "How about this? Does it feel good?" She thought that he would let go of her in pain, but he didn't. No matter how painful it was, he still held on to her. Cold sweat dripped down from his forehead, drenching his hospital gown in an instant, making his wounds even more uncomfortable. She could naturally feel that he was powerless. No man could recover after such a blow. Qin Shin wouldn't show any mercy to a pervert like him. Lan Yu endured the pain, and a cold smile appeared on his face. Under her shocked gaze, his palm undid her hand with astonishing dexterity. This was the most humiliating moment for Qin Shin. This man actually treated her like this. This man actually dared to treat her like this. He actually clearly couldn't take it anymore, but he still wanted to take advantage of her. And didn't his wounds hurt? It hurt a lot. She hadn't had a man for a few years, and now he was so rude. This was not some little game between lovers, but a kind of humiliating torture. He was almost ruthlessly teasing her, treating her. Qin Shin was in pain and a little confused. In her memory, there had never been such a thing. She didn't even remember having sex with Rong Lei. This was the first time she had been tortured by a man's fingers. And it was in her office, and the man was covered in wounds. There were some unspeakable parts that couldn't be touched. How shameless and thick-skinned did he have to be to dare treat her like this? Qin Shin was furious, and her body was covered in sweat. She couldn't vent, and he came over and asked her shamelessly, "Does it feel good?" She bit his neck right away, right at the artery. When that artery was bitten, it made people feel like they were on the verge of death, and Lan Yu was no exception. But he didn't feel fear. Instead, he treated her even more viciously. He stared at her and said hoarsely, It's best if we both die here. Qin Shun, if you bite me to death, I dare to kill you. Do you want to have a try, huh? Qin Shin stared back at him, his skin trembling. Finally, she relented and gnashed her teeth. You lunatic. She let go, but he wouldn't. I'm crazy. Can't you feel it? His voice was hoarse and hoarse. Yes, you're a person who has forgotten the past. How can you feel that you have a heart? It was as if he had gone mad. After tossing and turning like this, he actually caused trouble again. After the pain subsided, he felt that he had finally taken her in the midst of her violent struggle. However, 2 seconds, everything was calm. The atmosphere that had calmed down was delicate and embarrassing. As a man who had just had sex with a woman, 2 seconds was not a number that she could be unyielding about. Moreover, he had forced her to do it. He leaned against the side of her neck and panted slightly. Qin Shin lowered her head and looked at him. She sneered, Mr. Lon, you better take some medicine before you rape me next time. Otherwise, you'll humiliate yourself and it won't look good on your face. Lon Yu raised his head slightly, his gaze fixed on her. The meaning behind it was a little outrageous. Chapter 29:29. Lon Yu's face looked terrible. As a man, he was despised to this extent. Moreover, it was the woman he hated. But what he hated more was himself. He hated her, but at the same time, he desired her. He couldn't help it, and he was angry. Qin Shun had already tidied up his clothes and walked 2 steps. It seemed that he was going to get a cup of coffee. Lon Yu didn't know where the courage came from, but he hugged her from behind. The huge momentum made them stumble until they reached the desk. I'll let you know if it's 10 seconds. His face was close to her neck, and his voice was low and husky. His hot breath blew on the side of her neck, arousing her passion. Qin Shin bit her lip. If you dare to touch me again, I'll call the police. Call the police. Let others see how the high and mighty Dr. Qin is held in the arms of a man, and how she makes love to a man. He pressed his face against hers. I heard that Miss Qin has a cold and light sex life now. How can a cold and light sex life give birth to a child, huh? After he said that, he showed her that he only had 10 seconds. In the end, it was 2 hours. It wasn't that it didn't end, but he continued almost as soon as it ended, without any rest in between. After his bitter repression was released, he hugged her crazily and came again and again. And he just hugged her like that, and he didn't even have the mood to change. It wasn't that Qin Shin didn't resist. Firstly, there was the difference in strength between a man and a woman, and secondly, he was hugging her from behind, so she couldn't exert any strength, just like that. The love that seemed to be gnawing on his bones, and blood continued. The man and the woman didn't speak, as if they would break this shameful and unspeakable scene if they spoke. Until the end, he was still hugging her. His sweat was cold, but his heart was still beating very fast. Qin Shin's voice was unbelievably hoarse. Can you let go of me now? Lon Yu closed his eyes slightly and didn't speak. He just felt that bone-chilling feeling again. In the end, he still let go of her. Qin Shin held onto the desk and slowly walked to the sofa to sit down. He straightened his clothes. At this moment, her beautiful brown curls were loose and her face was flushed red. She was especially seductive. Lon Yu has never seen her like this. This is a huge temptation for all men. Qin Shin's forehead was still dripping with sweat. His breathing was slightly chaotic, but his voice was very cold. Is Mr. Lon satisfied? If so, you can get lost. Lon Yu also tidied up his clothes and slowly walked over. He leaned over and placed his hands on both sides of her body. His deep eyes gazed at her as he asked word by word, Miss Qin, are you satisfied? If not, I can continue. As soon as he finished speaking, he received a slap on his face. He did not evade, nor did he intend to evade. He just took it head on. Not only was he not angry, but he also laughed in a low voice. Getting slapped, sleeping with someone else's wife is very fair. Qin Shin raised his head and took a photo of him with his phone. There were red marks on his neck that she had scratched when she was excited. They were extremely warm. She took a photo. This action didn't annoy him. Instead, she took out her phone. Do you want to send it to Lu Wei? You don't have her WeChat, but I suggest you add her first. Do you think I don't dare? Chun gritted his teeth. Chapter 29:30. He moved his face close to hers and sneered. Tell her how it feels. After all, she hasn't tasted it for 10 seconds. Chun was so angry that she snatched his phone away and threw it at the wall. With a bang, the phone broke into pieces. Lanyu remained unmoved as he looked at her. His smile became even colder. His fingers gently caressed her lips as he muttered, "Your mouth is just as venomous as before, but your temper has become much worse." Chun slapped his hand away. "Get lost. You're not going to text Lu Wei anymore." He raised his head and chuckled. He pinched her chin. "It feels good to do it with you. Did you make Ron Lei feel good too, huh?" This time, she was completely infuriated. She had a coffee mug in her hand, and she threw it straight at him. Blood oozed out of Lan Yu's forehead, but he didn't care. He looked at her in the red mist, at the woman he used to love. In the mist, he seemed to see her in the past, his past self. He fainted. Before he fainted, he didn't know that he called out Chun. Half an hour later, Lan Yu was sent back to the ward. His attending doctor was busy stitching up the wound on his forehead. He didn't dare to say anything to the murderer. Chun looked at Lan Yu, who had fainted. His face was pale, and his expression was gloomy. She had never seen a person so gloomy, even when he was asleep. She tilted her head and asked the doctor, "Will he be okay?" The attending doctor's gaze was meaningful. "Of course, there won't be a problem with the injury on his body, but I don't know about the injury on his heart." Chun glanced at him and said, "Just keep him alive." With that, he turned and left. The attending doctor and the nurse looked at each other. Dr. Chun was still the same Dr. Chun. He was cold as hell. Lan Yu should be glad that Chun didn't have a doctor now. Otherwise, he wouldn't even know how he died. Just like what Chun had said, it was enough as long as he was alive. Vegetative patients were still alive. The attending physician wiped his sweat and continued suturing. In the parking lot of the hospital, Chun sat in the car and quietly looked at the dark night outside. At this moment, she was sure that she and Lan Yu had sex before. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been able to find a way to make her happy so precisely today. He was astonishingly familiar with her body, and though she resisted, they were shamefully in tune in that respect. She leaned back against the seat and opened the window to calm herself down. Tonight's events had exceeded her expectations. She must forget that she did not want to be involved with a man, even if this man and she had what. She would never forget that his girlfriend was Lu Wei, and they were almost engaged tonight. Scum. In the end, Chun came to a conclusion and started the car to leave the parking lot. Before returning to the apartment, she went to a pharmacy to buy a 24-hour contraceptive pill. When she was done, the female shop assistant seemed to be talking to herself. "Miss, don't worry. The medicine here is all real now. There are no fakes. The previous boss was heartless and specialized in selling fake medicine, especially this medicine. If you want to eat it without any effect, how many more children will you have?" Chun frowned. The previous medicine was fake. Chapter 29:31. Chun wasn't interested in gossip, but at that moment, she felt that it wasn't a bad idea to listen. Thus, she bought a bottle of water and drank it with the medicine. The shop assistant smiled and said, "Let me tell you, one day, a man came to buy this medicine. It just so happened that the medicine was fake. That's why I wanted to tell you. But he bought it for a man to eat." The shop assistant's expression was one of speechlessness. "I really don't know why two men would take medicine after doing that kind of thing. Just thinking about it makes me sick." Chun also felt that it was a fantasy and smiled. The shop assistant's face was full of longing. But that man was really handsome. He was the most handsome man I've ever seen. Unfortunately, he was a little girl. As she said that, she looked at Chun. "Ah, you don't say. Miss, you look very similar to that beautiful man." The shop assistant kept sizing her up as if she wanted to see clearly. Chun's lips curled into a cold smile. "You're wrong." After saying that, she left straight away. The shop assistant stared at her back for a long time. Suddenly, she slapped her thigh. "This cold aura, it seems to be her. TT, this was the one who took the contraceptive pill back then? TT, did she accidentally leave behind a child? The shop assistant looked at her. She didn't have the courage to ask, unless she was courting death. Chinshin got into the car and immediately started it. She drove very fast, and there was a hint of coldness on her face. What the hell? Why was there Lanyu everywhere? Lanyu seemed to be everywhere in this city. Chinshin didn't return to the apartment immediately. Instead, she circled around the city and went for a run. She bought breakfast and newspapers and prepared to go back. After sweating all over, she felt much better. However, she didn't expect that the entertainment headline of this morning's newspaper would be her. She appeared in the same frame as Lanyu in Zhao Yan's restaurant, including the dim corridor, her appearance in the hospital, and the scene of Lanyu appearing at her office door. The last picture was of her buying medicine at the pharmacy in the middle of the night. A certain unscrupulous person even enlarged the medicine box in her hand again and again, and the words of certain brand of morning after medicine could be clearly seen. Chinshin took a sip of her drink, tore the newspaper in half, and threw it into the trash can. She didn't care about this matter. Anyway, a certain man would wipe his ass clean, just as she expected. The one who had the biggest reaction about her and Lanyu spending the night together was none other than Lu Wei. Early in the morning, Lu Wei went to the hospital, not to comfort, but to question. Lanyu was seriously injured, but after learning the gossip early in the morning, he still spent a lot of money to suppress the news about Chinshin. He had just finished his work and wanted to take a rest when Lu Wei came. Lu Wei brought a bouquet of lilies and found a vase to nourish them. Lanyu furrowed his eyebrows and sneezed. He pointed at the flower and frowned. "Take it away. Take it away." Lu Wei was stunned for a moment before she took it away. However, Lanyu's wounds opened again on his head and body. The attending doctor was busy for a while. Of course, he looked at Lu Wei with a meaningful gaze. Was he here to settle the score this early in the morning? The doctor was very black-bellied. He felt that the conflict between the couple wasn't deep enough, so he coughed lightly. "Mr. Lan, you can't do any more strenuous exercises. Even if it's a married couple, you have to control your time. Limit it to less than 10 minutes. 2 hours or something. It's better to avoid it in the end. Married couple life. 10 minutes. Chapter 29:32. Did the doctor mean that Lanyu had done it with Chinshin for 2 hours last night? To her, this was simply an insult. Lu Wei was so angry that her face turned pale. She tried her best to control her emotions and said to the doctor, "Please go out for a while. I have something to talk to Mr. Lan." The doctor smiled mysteriously. "Okay." With that, he took the nurse away, leaving the fiancé behind. Lu Wei didn't make things difficult for him immediately. Instead, she sat quietly, peeled an apple, and carefully cut it into pieces for Lanyu. Lanyu thanked her and ate in silence. Lu Wei looked at him and said slowly, "Lanyu, you didn't refuse. Does that mean you haven't decided who to choose?" "Choose?" Lanyu looked at her. "Aren't you thinking too much?" As a woman, Lu Wei had been holding it in for a long time. At this moment, she finally exploded. "Don't you know whether I'm thinking too much or not? Lanyu, you did it with her last night, didn't you?" Lu Wei restrained herself, but her voice was still trembling. 2 hours, right? Lanyu put down the apple in his hand and looked at her silently. "Are you questioning me now? If I say yes, you're going to tell us to forget about it, right?" His voice was very soft and calm, but in Lu Wei's heart, he knew very well that in such a calm moment, he had already regained control. In fact, it wasn't her decision, but he had decided to break up. It was Chinshin who had appeared, and he didn't want to be with her anymore. Lu Wei looked down and smiled. "Lanyu, are you really so heartless? Or are you so infatuated with her that you can't extricate yourself?" He frowned. Lu Wei stood up, and her bohemian dress fell to the ground. "Whatever she can give you, I can give you." He stared at her, not at her body, but at her eyes. After looking at her for a long time, he said softly, "I did do it with her last night, and I didn't even take a shower after we finished. I forced her. She can also sue me. If there are surveillance cameras in her office, I'm probably in jail right now." He stated it quietly, as if he was stating a fact. However, Lu Wei felt that he was saying how much he loved Qin Shun and was willing to do anything crazy for Qin Shun. She was embarrassed. He still admitted it, and he was the one who forced it. Lu Wei's throat was choked with sobs. She grabbed her clothes and covered her body, sobbing silently. She had never cried like this before for a man. She stood in front of him like this, but he was indifferent. Lan Yu looked at her and finally sighed. He slowly got up and walked towards her. At this moment, the door opened. Lu Wei also happened to see the person at the door. The dress in her hands slipped down. Then she reached out to hug Lan Yu and suddenly kissed his lips. Qin Shun stood at the door and looked at the lovey-dovey scene in the ward. He smiled faintly and leaned against the door. It seems that I was worried for nothing. I wanted to explain to Miss Liu, but now it seems that there is no need. Lan Yu's body stiffened. He couldn't see Qin Shun, but he could imagine the expression on her face when she said this. It must be full of mockery. His voice was very low. Did you do this on purpose, Lu Wei? Lu Wei raised her head, and her eyes were watery. Lan Yu, I don't want to lose you. Lan Yu's voice was slightly cold. Really? Then prove it to me. Qin Shun leaned against the door and raised his hand. 2 nurses came over. Chapter 29:33. The blue veins on Lan Yu's forehead bulged. Qin Shun pursed his lips and smiled mockingly, turning love into a prank. Miss Liu, if I were a man like you, I would stay away from you as far as I can. A man who cheats on a woman, why should she keep him for the new year? When he said that, the nurse next to him really wanted to clap her hands. Dr. Qin, well said. However, looking at Lan Yu's dark face, she still didn't dare to clap. After saying that, Qin Shun left directly. The nurse also left, looking at Lan Yu with regret. She really wanted to say to him, you don't deserve this woman at all. Qin Shun went straight out, took the elevator to the first floor, and met Huang Xia on the first floor. She only remembered that Huang Xia was a distant cousin, but she didn't remember when Huang Xia's leg became a crutch. Qin Shun stared at Huang Xia for a long time, and such a gaze undoubtedly hurt Huang Xia. She said in an almost sharp voice, Qin Shun, you still have the face to come back? Qin Shun looked at the woman in front of him, who was almost hysterical. Huang Xia had changed a lot. In Qin Shun's impression, Huang Xia had always been quiet, educated and polite, very like a teacher. They hadn't seen each other for a few years. How could she become like this now? Just when Qin Shun was in a daze, Huang Xia gritted her teeth. Qin Shun, if it weren't for you, how could I become like this? If it weren't for you and Lan Yu, I would have been Mrs. Lan long ago. Qin Shun closed his eyes slightly. It's Lan Yu again. The little sympathy for Huang Xia just now was gone. Qin Shun sneered. Shouldn't you ask yourself what you become? Can others change you? After that, she left directly, showing her usual coldness. Huang Xia turned around and looked at Qin Shun's back. Needless to say, her brown hair was very beautiful, and her figure also had the gentleness of a woman. These were all things that Huang Xia didn't have, or rather lost. She shouted at Qin Shun's back, Qin Shun, so what if you've had it before? He's not yours now. Qin Shun paused and slowly turned around. She saw not only Huang Xia, but also Lan Yu. Lan Yu must have been accompanied by Lu Wei to the first floor, and he happened to be standing behind Huang Xia. Qin Shun looked in their direction and said in a low voice, I've never wanted it either. It doesn't matter if I get it or not. After she finished speaking, she left without looking back. Huang Xia gritted her teeth, but when she turned around, she saw Lan Yu and Lu Wei standing side by side. Lu Wei looked at Huang Xia's expression as though she was looking at a lowly creature. She had heard of Huang Xia's affairs. She was just a woman who wouldn't let go of Lan Yu, and she had never paid any attention to Huang Xia. Lu Wei supported Lan Yu and said in a low voice, Let's go for the examination. Lan Yu did not say anything and left with her. As for Huang Xia, she stood where she was, feeling empty all around her. Her entire body was cold, especially where she had lost a leg, which was aching faintly. Tears streamed down her cheeks. Why? Why did Lan Yu have to be with another woman? Why did Qin Shun have to come back? Isn't it good that we're not happy together? Huang Xia's entire body was trembling, and it was an abnormal trembling. On the other side, Lu Wei supported Lan Yu and helped him with the examination silently. His body was severely injured, and it was Qin Shun who had gotten someone to beat him up. Even so, he still pressed down on Qin Shun for 2 hours. What kind of love and hate was that? Chapter 29:34. Lu Wei would rather Lan Yu's feelings for Qin Shun were mixed with hatred. Otherwise, she would be even more afraid that Lan Yu would leave her at any time. While Lan Yu sat there waiting, Lu Wei's fingers gently stroked his forehead and asked softly, "Did she do it herself?" Lan Yu didn't answer directly. Instead, he gently took Lu Wei's hand and said calmly, "Lu Wei, don't force yourself. Don't let yourself suffer." As soon as he finished speaking, Lu Wei started crying. She restrained herself and suppressed her voice. "How am I inferior to her?" "Lan Yu, tell me." "There's nothing inferior about it. She's not worse than her, and her temper is many times better than hers. She rarely cries, especially when I'm wrong. She'll either hit me or just walk away. She doesn't care about feelings." Lan Yu sighed. "So, Lu Wei, you shouldn't like someone who's good. Feelings are hard to explain. If he could let go back then, he would have been with Huang Xia." Lu Wei looked down and held his hand. "Do you still love her?" "Love?" Lan Yu shook his head. "I don't love her anymore, but I might still hate her." He could let go of someone he loved, but he might not be able to let go of someone he hated. At this moment, he was willing to let go of Lu Wei. He was someone who lived in the dark. He alone was enough, and he didn't want to drag anyone else into it. He also tried his best to get along with Lu Wei. There was a time when he thought that he would propose to Lu Wei. But that night, when Lu Wei took out the rings, he knew how much he had pushed himself. He thought that he wasn't ready yet. He just didn't like her enough. However, he was so madly infatuated with Qin Shun's body that the moment he took possession of Qin Shun, he felt that his life was over. He knew that it was poison, but he still got infected again. Lan Yu lowered his voice. "Lu Wei, don't waste any more time on me." He looked into the distance and laughed self-deprecatingly. A person whose heart is filled with hatred will never be able to find happiness. Lu Wei was stunned. She looked at Lan Yu and slowly said, "Do you hate her? Then why did he still want to possess Qin Shun? Why did he still want to make love to her?" Lu Wei didn't understand and didn't want to give up. She had worked so hard to manage her relationship with Lan Yu. She had never dared to force him or make him feel any displeasure. However, when he said that he hated Qin Shun, he walked over to Qin Shun's side. No matter how badly Qin Shun treated him, he still couldn't let it go. Lu Wei squatted down and placed her face on Lan Yu's knee. She didn't say anything and just quietly hugged him, waiting for his heart to soften. Lan Yu looked down and closed his eyes slightly. "There is no happiness when you are with me," Lu Wei murmured. "Lan Yu, you don't have to love me, as long as I love you. As long as we are together, you will gradually forget her. Let's have a child. We can take the child and our parents on a trip every year." She raised her head and looked at him eagerly. "You can do it." Lan Yu looked at the woman in front of him and suddenly sighed. "Lu Wei, we are engaged. I mean, a public engagement party." Lu Wei was surprised and looked at Lan Yu in disbelief. She didn't see the disillusionment in Lan Yu's slightly closed eyes. When he opened his eyes again, he smiled gently. "We are engaged." Chapter 29:35. Lu Wei's eyes flashed with tears of joy as she nodded. Lan Yu didn't have any expression on his face. He just looked at Lu Wei, who was crying tears of joy. After a long time, he suddenly asked softly, "Lu Wei, do you love me?" Lu Wei was stunned and then said, "Of course I do." Lan Yu didn't say anything else. He was just thinking, if he loved her, why could he still endure these things? After the examination and confirming that there was nothing wrong with his skull, he went to rest. As for why he was so tired, he knew in his heart, and so did Lu Wei. It was just that he couldn't say it out loud. When Lu Wei left, she looked very happy. But when she reached the first floor, she stopped again. That Huang Xia was like a haunting ghost still standing there. Lu Wei didn't want to talk to her and lower her style. so she went around and wanted to leave. Huangxia suddenly opened her mouth and said in a low voice, "Do you think you've won?" Lu Wei stopped and looked at the woman in front of her. She chuckled and said, "In half a month, Lan Yu and I will be engaged. At that time, all the celebrities in City B will be able to witness it, but you may not have the chance to attend." Huangxia smiled coldly, and her smile was very sinister and scary. Lu Wei stopped laughing. "What are you laughing at?" During the 6 months when she and Lan Yu were dating, she could often see this woman appear, which was very annoying. Huangxia said very slowly, "Lu Wei, do you look down on me?" There was a hint of mockery in Lu Wei's eyes. Huangxia laughed. "I used to be like you. I had everything and was also obsessed with Lan Yu. I was like you, thinking that I would be with Lan Yu, but it was all just an illusion." She raised her eyebrows and slowly walked forward until she was in front of Lu Wei. Her voice was rough. "As long as Qin is here, don't think about being Mrs. Lan. Even if you are, as long as Qin is willing, Lan Yu will sleep with you every night, not Mrs. Lan. Do you believe me?" Lu Wei's lips trembled. She wanted to refute, but she couldn't say a single word. "They slept last night. How long has it been since Qin came back? How many times have they met?" Huangxia laughed. Her smile was extremely ugly. At this moment, not only did she lose her legs, even her face was pale. She had given up on herself. Her eyes widened, and her yellow teeth formed a sharp contrast with Lu Wei's neat teeth. "I pity you." Huangxia smiled coldly. "You're so full of yourself." With that, she supported herself with her walking stick and limped away. Lu Wei stood where she was and pursed her lips. She didn't believe what Huangxia said. If Lan Yu loved Qin that much, he wouldn't be with Lu Wei. At this moment, she did not realize that she could deceive herself and others, but Lan Yu could as well. Everyone who was injured would find another person to help them heal until their injuries were healed. Lu Wei didn't believe it, but she was still stubborn. She wanted to be engaged to Lan Yu, and she would even invite Qin that day. Yes, she wanted to tell the whole world that she had Lan Yu. The news that Lu Wei and Lan Yu were about to be engaged caused a sensation in B City, and the news was accidentally released by Lu Wei on a program. Chapter 29:36. Lan Yu turned off the TV and lay back down. He lit a cigarette and exhaled a long smoke ring after taking a puff. Guze sat beside him and exhaled smoke together. The nurse had come over and said that she couldn't do anything about them. Guze glanced at Lan Yu. "Are you really going to get engaged? You have to think about it carefully. You have a reputation now. If you go back on your word after getting engaged, it won't end well." He paused for a moment. Lu Wei and Qin are both public figures now. The fashion industry is the same as the entertainment industry. Their fans are crazy. Why don't you think about it again? Seeing that Lan Yu didn't speak, Guze was really worried for him. "You should at least say something." He nudged Lan Yu with his shoulder. "Have you really forgotten about Qin and started from the beginning?" Lan Yu glanced at him and grunted. Then he began to play with the lighter in his hand, looking absent-minded. Guze smiled bitterly. "You look like you don't want to talk about it. You weren't like this when you mentioned Qin before." Lan Yu smiled. "It's enough to love once in a person's life. How can there be so many feelings to squander?" Guze paused. "I really sympathize with the future, Mrs. Lan." Lan Yu glanced at him. "You should sympathize with yourself." With that, he lifted the quilt and got up. Guze looked at him. "Where are you going?" He hadn't been discharged yet. Lan Yu held a cigarette in one hand and buttoned his shirt with the other. He said calmly, "There's a call from the sanatorium. I'm going to see Cece." Moreover, Mr. and Mrs. Lin were also back in B City. He had to meet them and go to a few places to greet them. He paused for a moment and was a little absent-minded. Guze looked at his expression and said what he was thinking. "You may not have such feelings for Lu Wei. In my opinion, you might as well marry Lin Cece instead of Lu Wei. At least Lin Cece won't bother you, and you can do whatever you want. You can also raise a few kids outside." "Are you kidding me?" Lan Yu sneered. With the Lin family's background, taking care of her has already attracted a lot of attention, and you still want to marry her? Not to mention Cece's current state. Even if a fairy descended to Earth, Lan Yu would not have such thoughts. If you want to marry, then marry a woman who has nothing to do with you. Just like that time, when Huang Xia's leg was broken, he refused to marry her. She was Qin Chen's cousin. Why would he marry her? Saving it for the new year? As he spoke, he had already walked out. Gu Zhe thought about it and decided to chase after him. I'll go with you. In the elevator, Lan Yu leaned against the elevator wall and looked at Gu Zhe with deep eyes. How free are you? If you have nothing to do, find a woman and solve the problem of your Gu family. Don't follow me all the time. I can't find a wife for you even if you follow me. As he spoke, he said gloatingly, don't think about Qin Mu. Zhou Chengwang is doing well now. You probably won't have an affair and divorce until you die. Gu Zhe's face suddenly turned ugly, and he sneered. You have a better chance. Qin Chen's husband died. Why don't I see you doing it? I'm doing it. Lan Yu's voice was indifferent. If you have the ability, do it for me. This time, it was Gu Zhe's turn to be dumbfounded. He did it. Was what the gossip said true? In a hospital, in Qin Chen's office, there was a lot of information. Gu Zhe coughed lightly. Then, are you still engaged to Lu Wei? Chapter 29:37. Gu Zhe swallowed his words. They went to the suburbs together and came to the sanatorium. Mr. Lin and Mrs. Lin were there, but Lin Cece was obviously a little afraid of them. When she saw Lan Yu, she pounced over and hugged Lan Yu like a little animal seeing its mother. She buried her face in Lan Yu's arms and looked at Gu Zhe carefully, as if a strange man had invaded her territory. Gu Zhe smiled and stayed by her side. Among the girls, Lin Cece's appearance was considered top-notch. Madame Lin used to be the most beautiful woman in Sea City, and Lin Cece grew up in a honeypot, so naturally, she was more delicate. Even though she was so silly now, her natural delicacy couldn't be erased. Even Gu Zhe couldn't bring himself to hate her. He glanced at Lan Yu, thinking about what he had said to him. In his opinion, Lin Cece was indeed much cuter than Lu Wei. How should he put it? Lu Wei looked perfect, but if she was too perfect, she would be no different from a vase. He looked at Lan Yu and Lin Cece together, and they were obviously much happier. As for Lu Wei, he was sorry, but he really didn't feel anything. Mr. and Mrs. Lin were a little uneasy when Lin Cece hugged Lan Yu like this, especially Mr. Lin. He coughed lightly. Cece, it's okay, Lan Yu said softly, then lowered his head and gently touched the little girl. She's used to playing with me. The Lin family's parents still felt that it was inappropriate, but Lin Cece leaned against Lan Yu with a sweet face. Mrs. Lin sighed and didn't say anything else. Lan Yu's hand touched Lin Cece gently. He hesitated for a moment and said to Mr. and Mrs. Lin, I'll take Cece out to eat something. She had been locked up here for a long time and had almost never gone out. Actually, there was nothing wrong with her. She was very quiet and obedient. When Gu Zhe heard this, he looked at Lan Yu sideways. Lan Yu looked at him. Are you going? Gu Zhe nodded. Of course. We're already here. Lan Yu didn't say anything and just brought his men away. In the car, other than the silly Lin Cece and Lan Yu, there was no one else. Only then did Gu Zhe dare to say, Are you sure that what you're doing now is the right thing to do? Don't forget that your Lu Wei is getting engaged in half a month. Lan Yu was focused on the road as he drove. He smiled and asked, What's the problem? Gu Zhe looked at the little fool beside him meaningfully, but he didn't say anything else. The little fool, on the other hand, felt uneasy. She hadn't seen a stranger of the opposite sex for a few years. The appearance of a handsome and masculine man like Gu Zhe was like a bolt of lightning to her. She was already scared to death sitting next to him, not to mention feeling that he had ill intentions towards her. Lin Cece was a little scared. She wanted to move to the front seat, but she was afraid that Lan Yu would be unhappy, so she could only sit in the back seat. However, she kept moving until she was at the furthest side, far away from Gu Zhe. She only relaxed when she couldn't smell the man's scent anymore. Lan Yu looked at the rearview mirror and smiled. His gaze fell on Gu Zhe for a while. Gu Zhe was worried about him, but he was more worried about Gu Zhe. Lan Yu heard that there was a type of fox that once it set its eyes on someone, it wouldn't leave even if it died. Chapter 29:38. Lan Yu chuckled as he drove the car to a famous Western restaurant in the city. There was a wide variety of food here, especially the desserts, which girls liked. He had bought them for Cece in the past, but he had always eaten them in her room and had never had the chance to take her out to eat. At this moment, Lin Cece was sitting in the high-class Western restaurant. She was a little timid and uneasy as she asked carefully, "Can I really order?" Lan Yu smiled. "Of course." Lin Cece bit her lip and looked at him. "But it looks very expensive." Lan Yu couldn't help but laugh. He lifted his body slightly and stroked Lin Cece's long black hair. "You still know that it's expensive?" As he said this, he felt a little bitter. In the past, Lin Cece could get whatever she wanted. Not to mention a Western-style meal, it was a piece of cake for her to buy 10 restaurants. But now, she was asking him with such a naive expression if it was expensive. Lin Cece was a little relieved after seeing Lan Yu like this. Although she was a little silly, her English was very good. She recited the menu in English and even ordered an aperitif and dessert for herself. Lan Yu smiled. Guze chuckled. "Lan Yu, can I order too?" Lan Yu looked at him as if he was looking at a pervert. Guze chuckled. He took the menu and ordered in fluent English. When he closed the menu, he looked at Lin Cece with sparkling eyes. He smiled and said gently, "What's wrong?" Lin Cece bit her lip and didn't speak to him. Guze smiled and didn't force her. The waiter left and soon brought over an aperitif and dessert. The two men sipped casually. At the same time, Lan Yu stopped Lin Cece from drinking. He was sure that she wouldn't be able to control herself after drinking. Lin Cece looked at him. She was a little unhappy, but she still obeyed. Only then did Lan Yu shift his gaze away and speak to Guze. In the past 2 years, Grand Hyatt and Guze's companies had a lot of cooperation. Naturally, the two of them were familiar with each other and talked about a wide range of topics. Lin Cece didn't understand, nor did she want to understand. Not only did she eat her dessert, but she also secretly ate theirs. So before the main course was served, her little belly was already round. Then, the two men were still chatting, and she just watched from the side, pretending that she hadn't eaten. Anyway, she had already licked the plate clean, so no one would know. She could just pretend that the waiter had served an empty plate. When the waiter served the main course, Lan Yu and Guze had just finished their conversation. When he looked down, he saw that the plate was empty. He looked at Lin Cece. Guze did the same. His gaze was somewhat clear as he stared at her small face. Lin Cece's face was a little red. She lowered her head and whispered, "I don't know. I didn't eat it." He confessed without being pressed. Lan Yu was still staring at her. And only then did Guze know why Lan Yu would take care of Lin Cece like that. Men like them were under a lot of pressure from work and had no fun to speak of. Having such a little fool by their side was a great way to relieve boredom, especially since Lin Cece's looks were pleasing to the eye. He didn't think so in the past, but now that she had become a little fool, she was especially pleasing to the eye. However, Guze also saw that Lin Cece's little finger was missing. He tried not to notice it, afraid that he would hurt the little fool's feelings. After looking at her for a long time, Lan Yu then reprimanded her in a low voice. "If you eat too much, you'll have an upset stomach. You'll be afraid to go to the toilet at night. What if you can't find a nurse?" It was very rare for him to reprimand her like this. Lin Cece was a little scared. Chapter 29:39. Guze met her gaze and was a little surprised, but he quickly smiled. "Lan Yu, it's natural for girls to like to eat. Don't be so fierce. Look at her. She's about to cry from fright." Lan Yu looked at Guze and raised his eyebrows. "If I don't care about her, who will care? Guze, will you care?" Guze almost agreed, but he swallowed his words in the end. Raising a little fool was like raising a pet. It was easy to get used to, but it was hard to get rid of. You could ignore other women, but if you didn't want a little fool, you would definitely soften your heart when she looked at you with tears in her eyes, and Guze's heart had been cold for too long. Guze didn't say a word. Lin Cece looked at him uneasily. She pursed her lips and asked softly, "Lan Yu, does he hate me?" Lan Yu looked at Guze and smiled. "You can ask him." The little fool didn't dare to ask. She only dared to sneak glances at Guze. Lan Yu gave Guze a look, letting him experience it himself. Guze restrained his expression and said to the little fool seriously, "I don't hate you." The little fool mustered up her courage. "So you don't like me?" What kind of logic was that? Guze felt that any answer would be inappropriate. If he said she didn't like him, the little fool would probably cry. If he said she liked him, what would he do if the little fool stuck to him like she did Alanya? So, he chose to remain silent. His silence still made the little fool unhappy. When Lin Cece was eating, she was obviously not as energetic as before. She kept her head down and didn't make a sound. Lanyu looked at Guze and gave him a look, asking him to coax the little girl. Guze refused. He didn't want to be the second Lanyu. But his refusal was useless because there was an uninvited guest in the restaurant. It was none other than Lanyu's fiancée, Lu Wei. Moreover, Lu Wei was with her parents. If she came over, Lanyu would have no reason to sit at this table. When he got up, Lin Cece tugged at his sleeve. If Lanyu sat down now, it would be equivalent to giving up on Lu Wei. Lu Wei was very magnanimous. Call Cece along. She had always known about Lin Cece's existence, but she thought that Lin Cece staying in the sanatorium wouldn't affect her and Lanyu, so she didn't take it to heart. But today, she saw Lanyu bringing Lin Cece out for dinner. Although Guze was there, she still felt a sense of crisis. Guze could tell that she didn't invite Lin Cece out of kindness. Thus, he smiled faintly. Cece will be fine with me accompanying her. Lanyu looked at him. He was sure that Guze was reliable, so he made up his mind and left. This was also good for Lin Cece. He didn't want Lu Wei to make things difficult for Cece in the future. The moment he left, Lin Cece was like a child who had lost her parents. She grabbed his clothes and wouldn't let go. Lu Wei's gaze was fixed on him, and her face was gentle. But it was normal to be jealous and unhappy about this kind of thing. This kind of gentleness seemed artificial. Guze didn't agree with Lanyu's way of looking at her, but this was Lanyu's choice, so he couldn't say anything. He just got up and gently pulled Lin Cece's hand away. "I'll take you to another shop to eat dessert later, okay?" Lin Cece looked at him and said softly, "No." Lanyu and Lu Wei heard it too. Chapter 2940. However, Guze had already pulled Lin Cece up and half forcefully took the little fool away. This time, Lanyu was a little disappointed. The child ran away with another man. Lu Wei looked at him and smiled. It seems that Guze cares about Cece very much. "Lanyu, after we get married, can you let Guze take care of Cece?" Lanyu looked at her and walked with her to her parents' table. He said slowly, "Guze will get married too. Who will take care of Cece then?" Lu Wei stopped and looked at Lanyu. She asked seriously, "Are you going to take care of her for the rest of her life?" Lanyu said calmly, "Yes." Lu Wei did not expect him to be so straightforward. She felt uncomfortable but did not dare to say anything. So she forced a smile and did not say anything else. Although it was over, she still felt a little upset. So it was hard for her to be happy, even when they were eating together. Compared to the cold atmosphere here, Guze and the little fool's table was much livelier. Guze brought the little fool out. The car belonged to Lanyu. He did not have a car on such a hot day. In the end, they had to take a taxi. After getting the taxi, the little fool said softly, "You can't afford a car?" Guze's heart skipped a beat. He had tens of billions of yuan. How could he not afford a car? But he still teased the little fool. "Yes, I am very poor. So when we go to eat later, you have to order less and choose the cheapest food. Do you understand?" He told her solemnly. He felt that it was very interesting. Lin Cece looked at him with her big eyes. After a while, she said softly, "Then I better go back." She was not willing to follow him and not be able to eat anything. Guze did not know whether to laugh or cry. He did not expect such an answer. The little fool was silly, but she actually had the thought of despising the poor and loving the rich. She was very open about it. He could not help but tease her. If Lanyu was poor and had no money, would you still be willing to be taken care of by him? The little fool seemed to think for a while before saying softly, "I would still be willing. I can earn my own money. You can take care of the baby." When she said this, her little face was full of smiles. She looked a little silly, but very beautiful. Guzé was stunned for a moment. Then he gently stroked her little head and softly said, "Little fool." He actually cherished such a little fool. He was also a little jealous of Lanyu. He pressed her against his shoulder, not letting her move. The little fool's voice was very soft. "Are you taking advantage of me?" Guzé laughed. "That's not how you take advantage of others." With that, he planted a kiss on her forehead. For such a little fool, he was willing to give her more love and care. Since she had already become like this, he would let her feel that this world was beautiful. Lin Cece rubbed her head and glared at him as she rubbed it hard. Guzé gave a hollow laugh. "Lanyu didn't kiss you." "He wouldn't," Lin Cece said with certainty. "He said that he has someone he likes." With that, Guzé was a little surprised. He had always felt that there was some warmth in Lanyu taking care of Lin Cece. At the very least, he would hug her, and they might even have some sort of physical relationship. After all, Lin Cece had looked pretty good these few years. But they had not even kissed before, and Lin Cece did not seem to mind. Didn't she like Lanyu? Could it be that he was wrong? You're tuning in to the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.